I'm not interested in the word blame at all. Just blame bores the hell out of me. I just want to know what happened. And if I understand that my sense of abandonment with my wife that shows up in my relationship, which is kind of a tendency of mine, and then my reactive withdrawal and into sullenness and distancing, which is my particular relationship style, is rooted in some deep childhood experience of being given away by my mother and getting the sense of abandonment. That doesn't absolve me of responsibility. It gives me the responsibility of making the distinction that what can I do to liberate myself from the impact of the past, so I'm not imposing it on my wife and my environment. So knowing the past gives me a sense of responsibility and actually enables me to be in the present. And as friend and colleague and teacher of mine, Peter Levine, says, trauma represents the tyranny of the past. And the whole point is to liberate ourselves from the tyranny of the past so that we're not affected, we're not under the influence, we're not dominated by the impact of what happened to us in our formative years. So that recognizing all that is taking responsibility. It's my responsibility to be in the present. Well, first of all, trauma is multi-generation. Okay, it's passed on from one generation to the next. Not because we mean to, but because we do. It's just like it's a theme that runs through the generations. And I passed my traumas on to my kids. I didn't mean to, but I did. Your parents did. They didn't mean to. Your ADHD is a legacy of trauma. It's a legacy of stress. When you're, no. So you're not defined by the tyranny of the past at that point.
Yeah, totally.
You're open. Now, flow is an interesting word because at that point, you would probably agree, although your personality and your knowledge and your wit and your mind certainly helps you, but there's something flowing through you.
Yes.
You're not creating it as such. You're the vehicle for creation.
Yeah.
Would that be accurate?
Correct.
Well, it's the same way when I'm on stage and I'm talking to an audience. Like I'll be talking to 3,500 people here in New York tonight. Believe me, I'll be in a state of flow.
Yeah.
And I'll be present. Next morning with my wife,
Oh, no, don't say it. Don't say
I might not be in that state of flow.
Oh, no.
So there's something happens with people that have that sensitivity and that creativity. And that's where art actually comes from. And when there's something greater that moves through you, that's not defined by the past.
Mm-hmm.
So that's true. And, part of my problem is that I love that state so much. It tends to be a bit addictive to go there.
Sure.
And not to deal so much with the messy, nitty-gritty reality of everyday life.
Yeah.
Which is a lot more full of stumbles and blockages.
Yeah, and just traffic and responsibility.
Yeah, and the laundry.
Totally, bureaucry, nonsense.
All that stuff.
Yeah, totally.
But I get it, and that's a gift that you have. Well, first of all, I was one of those dads. My son Daniel, with whom I wrote The Myth of Normal, he actually writes in the book that growing up with me or in that family, it was like when the floor wasn't the floor. You never knew when the safety and the security would disappear and the floor would just open up because there would be these emotional explosions, I have had the experience of going into a rage, watching myself going into a rage, knowing that it wasn't right, and I had no power not to go into it at the same time. Now, I'm not making excuses. It's my responsibility.
Yeah.
And I know the harmful impact on the people around me. But here's what happens. There is a part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the gray matter, right here in the front.
Uh-huh.
And then there's another part here called the orbital frontal cortex, which is next to the eye socket. It's like right here. When people go somebody's loco, that's what that's what they're pointing at.
Oh, they're pointing to the upper right.
Yeah. The job of this part here, amongst others, is what's called response flexibility. That when something happens, I have the flexibility. So if my wife doesn't show up at the airport to pick me up, I could respond with rage and disappointment and a sense of abandonment. Or I could say, oh, that's disappointing. Too bad. I'll take a taxi home. That's called a response flexibility. This part here, impulse control, when an impulse arises, I don't have to act it out. I can say, oh, I'm feeling anger, but I don't have to act out the anger.
Sure.
And the impulse regulation. Now, in certain people, these circuits don't develop as well as they should, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, at that moment, the deeper emotion-laden, defensive and aggressive circuits of the brain take over. So when you say somebody lost it, I just lost it. What did they lose? They lost impulse regulation and response flexibility.
Yeah.
Those are trauma effects.
But
no. Here's what I want to say.
Sure.
That's not an excuse.
Yeah.
I'm not here to excuse anything. What I'm saying is, if you realize that about that, it's your job to go to work, to grow up. And growing up, I don't mean as a moral imperative. I mean, get into therapy, do something to develop these circuits. Do something so that you can be a responsible human being. That's totally on me.
Yeah.
So I can't use the past as an excuse, but I can understand the past to know what I have to overcome.
Yeah.
If you're a small kid being bullied, can you see how biting might be a totally natural response?
Oh, I totally got why I did it.
Yeah. It's a natural preventive defensive response.
Yes.
And it's an explanation. It's also an expression of your own frustration.
Yes.
A more interesting question is, when you're bullied, who did you talk to about it?
Nobody.
Sorry?
Nobody.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where your trauma was. If your kids were bullied, who would you want them to talk to?
Hopefully me.
If you found out that your kids were bullied and they suffered and they didn't talk to you, how would you explain that?
Can you ask me the question again? I'm sorry.
I'm asking a question, and I know this is a hard one.
Yeah.
And this is typical when people's minds go offline.
Yeah.
It's because it's a painful one. If your kids were bullied,
yes,
and they suffered humiliation, shame,
sure,
pain, fear,
yeah, of course, yeah,
and they did not talk to you about it, how would you explain why my kids are not talking to me? They don't trust you.
Yeah.
What's it like for a kid not to feel safe and trust with the parents? What's it like for?
It must be terrifying. Yeah, it's terrifying. Yeah.
That was your childhood.
My parents listen to this podcast. They're not going to be happy with this.
Well, your parents did their best.
Yeah.
They did their trauma. I did my best with my kids. I'm telling to your parents, and your parents are probably close to my age. I don't know, but
yeah, they're a little bit. Yeah, they're around your age. Yeah.
Yeah. Dear parents of Hassan, you did your best. That was your best because of the traumas that you had undergone.
Sure.
So there's nobody's being blamed here. But what I'm saying is that there was a trauma there for you of not having that safety and security. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about therapy, it's actually about understanding all that stuff, but not just understanding it, working it through the body so that it doesn't dominate you anymore.
Yeah.
Well, look, if you're presenting with two bad choices, then there's going to be no way out. But I don't see it as split into those two camps, one or the other, and there's no other reality. It's got nothing to do with demanding mea culpas. It's got nothing to do with taking a machine gun and shooting some 76-year-old with a hip replacement. It's got to do with each partner, each person understanding their own role in the relationship and their own responsibility in the relationship. Your healing does not depend on blaming your parents. It does depend on understanding what happened to you, but understanding what happened to you doesn't mean blaming your parents. Fact is, you were bullied and there's nobody for you to talk to about it. That's deeply painful. And that happened in your family of origin. But I'm not blaming your parents. Your parents did their best. It's for your parents, should they choose to,
yes,
to recognize what happened and to say, Hassan, that was reality. That was our reality.
Right.
But your healing doesn't depend on them acknowledging anything.
Yeah.
You don't depend on them for your healing. That's totally your responsibility. You see,
You deserve some credit.
I'm not interested in owing. Owing is like a should that you lay out. So I don't tell anybody what they should do. Okay. I'm saying that when somebody recognizes that, yes, my parents really had issues that prevented them from seeing who I was, from supporting me the way I needed to be supported. So here's the thing I would ask you. Are you the same person now that you were 30 years ago? So you've been able to grow?
Yeah, I've been able to grow and change.
Now, the more you're able to grow, and the less you are affected, the less you are under the effect of the past, the more gratitude will naturally arise. So I'm not saying to anybody, you should be grateful. There's no point in me telling anybody how they should feel. But I'm saying that gratitude, I can tell you a quick encapsulated story if you like.
If we're not pressed for time, please share the story.
I'm not pressed for time.
Okay, great.
So this story of my own infancy, where I'm 11 months of age, and my mother gives me to a total stranger.
Right. This is during World War II, during...
Second World War,
Yeah.
Nazi-occupied Hungary, severe, vicious anti-Semitism, threat of genocide, and I'm sick, and I'm hungry, and my mother just can't keep me alive. So she gives me to a stranger in the street, who takes me to some relatives living on relatively better circumstances, and they look after me. Now, all my life, I've had this deep sense of resentment of the unfairness of life. Why did this have to happen to me? And I've had a lot of mother anger, because the infant who's given to a stranger, it doesn't matter what the motives are, just perceives themselves as being abandoned. There's no other way the infant can see themselves.
Yeah.
Deep sense of abandonment that shows up 50 years later in my relationship with my wife. Okay, that's a really tragic story on the one hand. Or I could look at it this way. Think of the amount of love it would have taken on the part of a 24-year-old mother to give their infant after her own parents had been killed in Auschwitz, and her husband is away in forced labor, and she doesn't know if he's dead or alive, the husband. And she's got this infant. The infinite love would have taken on my mother to give me to a stranger to save my life. The love of the universe that shows up in this Christian woman who takes this Jewish infant and conveys him to these relatives. The love of the universe that's manifested in these relatives living under terrible circumstances, than to take in this sick baby and to look after me. So I could look upon the same story as one of bitter, unfair cruelty, or I could say, look at all the love that's in it. These days, I'm really aware of the gratitude for all the love.
At its core essence, what do people need?
Well, it depends on what stage. So here's what children need. Children need unconditional, secure attachments,
Yes.
where they're welcomed in the world for exactly who they are. Not because they're cute, cuddly, and compliant, or competitive, but because they are, period. Totally. Which is actually a need of the human child, just as much as oxygen is. Okay. Secondly, rest, so the child doesn't have to work to make the relationship with the parent work. If your father's an alcoholic, for example, very often children get to be the peacemakers in a family.
Yes.
Now they have to work to make their relationship work. That's devastating for the child's development. Thirdly, I mentioned human beings are born with this whole set of emotions, this circuitry: anger, fear, seeking, playfulness, lust, fear, grief.
Right.
The human child has to be able to experience those emotions when life demands it,
Yes.
and to be able to express them,
Yes.
and to have those emotions understood, accepted, and validated by the parents.
Yeah.
So these are some of the needs of children. Adults need more. They do need a sense of belonging, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, a sense of value. That has got nothing to do with how successful they are, or how pretty they are, or how much they please or don't please other people.
Right.
So we do need a sense of belonging, of acceptance, of meaning, of purpose. These are human needs. Frustrate these human needs, you're gonna get all kinds of dysfunctional behaviors. And in the United States right now, for example, there's been this, every year in the United States, last few years running, twice as many people a year die of drug overdoses as Americans who died in the Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghan wars put together.
Wow. So you're talking about the overdose on fentanyl and
Yeah.
opioids and all those things. Okay.
These have been called deaths of despair. And what's happened is that, and this is recognized, I think, on all sides, young men in the States have lost their sense of belonging, purpose, and meaning because the industrial heartland has been hollowed out. And Now they have no sense of meaning and purpose. They turn in desperation to drugs or to radical politics, And so people do need a sense of meaning, purpose, belonging. Take that away from them, you're going to get all kinds of dysfunction. So these are human needs.
Yeah.
And everybody on all sides needs a sense of purpose, meaning, and acceptance and belonging. Sometimes we get them from the wrong sources. Well, those things are not intuition. Those things are emotional dynamics based on confusion and trauma.
But sometimes you have anxiety reflux in your gut.
Oh yeah, it shows up in the gut all the time.
It comes up here.
It shows up in the same area, but it doesn't feel the same. Like when you have a strong gut feeling about something, there's a kind of certain knowledge about it and a certain degree of ease about it.
Yeah.
When you're having a strong emotion, there's usually perturbation and tension around it. So I'd say that on the body level, you can tell the difference about what you're experiencing inside. So the spiritual teacher, Eckhart Tolle, who lives in Vancouver like I do, he says, and I've learned a lot from his work, he says somewhere that emotions are the body's reaction to the mind, whereas gut feelings are the body's reaction to the external environment. So that without gut feelings, animals don't survive, do they?
Sure.
And human beings evolved in nature. And for millions of years and hundreds of thousands of years, until a blink of an eye ago, we all lived in nature. So gut feelings were essential for survival. And they just tell us, is it safe, is it not safe? Emotions are more complex, and emotions are very much affected by what we believe and our perceptions and our past dynamics. And so they're not the same as gut feelings. So it can be confusing, but when I work with people on this question of gut feelings versus emotions, I just direct them back into the body and say, let's see what's the body experience here. If there's a gut feeling, there's going to be a kind of a calm knowing about it. If there is a strong emotion, it's going to be tense. That's the big difference. You're always going to feel it in your body because emotions are literally physiological things. There's no mind-body separation, you see. It's not possible to have an emotion without your body being involved. There used to be a back specialist here in New York.
Yeah.
His name was John Sarno, S-A-R-N-O. He's no longer alive. He died not that long ago in his 90s.
Right.
And Larry David and a whole lot of other people swear by him because he was a back specialist. And he saved thousands of people from back surgery because he pointed out that their chronic back pain was a result, as I would also say, of unresolved emotion, particularly repressed anger. And so that muscles tighten and blood supply gets cut off. It's not that the back pain was imagined, but that the source of it wasn't the physical X-ray findings or mechanical, but repressed emotion. So somebody with chronic back pain, I'd want to talk to them about what's happening to them emotionally. And Sarno, who's written a number of books and a lot of very famous people swear by him, his point of view was much the same as mine. The difference is he was a back specialist. I was a general physician. So I looked at all manner of illness and all kinds of chronic conditions as related to people's emotional lives. He specifically looked at people's back pain, but we came to the same conclusion. So if you had chronic back pain, I'd want to talk to you about what's going on in your life. I've said this publicly before. I went in my bed till I was 13 years of age. And when I was 8 years old, or 9, I remember my mother taking me to a psychologist. And a psychologist took a history of my infancy and early childhood. And I remember him saying this. I was in the room when he said this to my mother. And he said, "Ma'am, if the only problem, based on what happened to him as an infant, if the only problem this boy has is that he wets his bed, you'll be very fortunate."
Oh, wow.
Now, as my family could tell you, that's not the only problem I have.
Sure, that was the beginning.
No. I first visited Gaza in 1992, 1991, in the West Bank. In 2004, there was a study of Gazan children that appeared in an international psychiatric journal. If anybody thinks that history began on October the 7th, 2023, they need to know this. In 2004, there was a study in the Journal of Psychiatry about Gazan children. This is 2 years before Hamas took power in Gaza. 2.5% of those kids had no traumatic symptoms. A large number had severe post-traumatic symptoms. They wet their beds, like I did. They were aggressive towards their parents, died in nightmares, depression, anxiety, based on the collective trauma that has been imposed on the Palestinian people in the name of my people, the Jewish people. And then I visited the West Bank in 2022 to do a workshop, a trauma workshop for young women who'd been tortured in Israeli prisons. And the mass torture of thousands of Palestinian prisoners has been documented by Israeli Physicians for Human Rights, by B'Tselem, the Israeli Human Rights Organization, by the United Nations, by all kinds of other international humanitarian organizations. This is all before October 7, 2023. So the Palestinian people, now there's no arguing about Jewish trauma. I mean, my people were horribly traumatized, as the whole world knows, as they should know, not just in the Second World War, but of course even before. Now we've transposed that trauma onto the Palestinians. We continue to. And in my adult life, in my conscious life, I've never seen anything as horrible as what is inflicted on the Gazan people right now and on the Palestinian people. It's almost every day that some Palestinian kid gets killed by Israeli forces, not in Gaza, in the West Bank. It's never reported in the Western press. So what's happening is a horrible collective traumatization. I recently wrote a foreword for a new book by a Palestinian psychiatrist, Dr. Sama Jabbar, and she used to be head of psychiatry for Palestine. And I wrote the foreword for her book, which is coming out very soon. In her book, Dr. Jabbar writes, how do I diagnose and deal with the suicidal depression of an 81-year-old man who comes to me with this suicidal depression because the home that he built with his own hands 20 years ago, now they're forcing him to demolish with his own hands. What do I do? Give him Prozac? So what we're talking about here is an almost unprecedented, massive traumatization of a whole people, which is cheered on by the West and not even reported on a daily basis. It's the worst thing I've seen in my whole life. It breaks my heart every day. When I was in Palestine 3 years ago, and anybody wants to, there's a film called Where the Olive Trees Weep that's available online, where I'm briefly featured doing this particular workshop with traumatized women. But when I was there 3 years ago, and just to give credit where credit is due, I was there because of the support of Israeli Jewish psychologists. So there were Israeli Jews who wanted to help the Palestinians and wanted to help this healing work to them. So I'm not making this a Jewish versus a Muslim or Jewish versus Palestinian issue. I'm making it's a human issue. Human beings on both sides. Unfortunately, one side wields all the power and has intentions that are nefarious as far as I'm concerned. But I was told that there's no post-traumatic stress disorder here because the trauma is never post, it's ongoing. And it is. That film that won the Academy Award, No Other Land, for Best Documentary, which shows the daily assaults on the dignity and the possessions and the lives of Palestinians by Israeli settlers and Israeli army in the West Bank. You probably heard that the Palestinian director was attacked a few weeks ago, lynched basically, outside his own home, and then arrested by the Israeli army for protecting himself from these settlers. So how do you heal trauma in the midst of the trauma? It's almost impossible. It's a beautiful statement by your dad, except I can't go there because I don't have a worldview that gives me an afterlife. Okay, so let me give you my secular version. Secular version of it.
Sure.
So this morning I'm reading the Guardian newspaper. It's about Ukrainian young men who enlist for the war to protect their homeland. And this one Ukrainian young man says, when somebody kills your brother, don't you want to take revenge? When somebody wants to steal your land, don't you want to fight back? Now, we write out about the Ukrainians, but we don't write out about the Palestinians, even though they're defending their land, and they have been. And they've been killed in large numbers for decades now. Profoundly unjust. Now, how do we deal with that? Well, there was a great Jewish sage that lived about 100 years before Jesus. And he said about the task of healing the world. And he said, the task is not yours to finish, but neither are you free not to take part in it. In other words, the task of righting this world, of promoting justice, it's a sacred calling that's with us through eternity. And how I make peace with it is not like your dad who, bless him, believes in his afterlife where things are going to be okay. The way I deal with it is, while I'm here, am I contributing to that task? That's not yours to finish. It's not going to be done in my lifetime, but it's something I can contribute to, and we can all contribute to it. So that's how I deal with it.